Soulcaster.
At exactly 4:03 a.m. last Tuesday, I woke up to the sound of my son locking the basement door from the inside. The soft metal click sliced through the silence like a scalpel. I was fully awake before I realized I'd been holding my breath. I stared at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly above me, cold sweat dripping into my hairline. This wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the 10th. For the past 3 weeks, my son Daniel and his wife Candace had been slipping downstairs every single night, always at 4 o'clock a.m. sharp. No missed nights, no excuses, no explanations. At first, I told myself it was none of my business. Maybe they were having problems. Maybe they just wanted privacy. God knows I've fought for less just to keep a marriage going. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more it gnawed at me. Like a loose tooth you know you shouldn't poke with your tongue, but you just can't help yourself. What tipped me over wasn't even the ritual of it. It was the way Candace smiled when I asked. "Just storage," she said one morning over coffee. She poured the creamer too quickly, and it sloshed onto the counter. "You're not missing anything." That was the moment I knew she was lying. Not because of what she said, but because she didn't look at me when she said it. Let me back up. After my husband died, I sold our house and moved into the guest suite in Daniel's new 5-bedroom suburban fortress. It made sense. I'd help with the kids while they worked, and I wouldn't have to eat dinner alone every night like a ghost. At least that's what I told myself. The truth? I needed them more than they needed me. Or that's what I thought, until I started noticing the cracks. Like how Daniel, once a mama's boy with a messy room and an overbite, now spoke to me like I was a coworker he barely tolerated. "Appreciate you picking up the kids," he'd say, not even looking up from his phone. Candace was worse. Polite, icy, elegant in a way that made you feel ashamed just for existing in sweatpants. She kept calling me Margaret, not Mum, like I was a guest overstaying her welcome. But it was the nights that got to me. Every night. Always at 4 o'clock a.m. The same dull footsteps, the same creak of the third stair, the same hush of whispered voices, then the basement lock clicking shut. And every night, I lay there, pretending not to notice, until I couldn't anymore. And listen, I know most people just scroll and move on, but if you're still reading, take a second to follow. Seriously, over 99% of people don't, and it helps my whole team keep making these. And trust me, it only gets weirder from here. The next morning, I tried asking Daniel, casually, like I wasn't suffocating on paranoia. "Is everything okay between you and Candace?" He glanced at me, blinked once, and said, "Of course. Why?" "No reason. I just noticed you both seem tired lately. Up late working?" He didn't answer right away. He just pulled his tie tighter, looked at the fridge like he forgot what it was for, and mumbled, "Yeah, something like that." Then he was gone. The kids, Ella, 7, and Max, 5, were still asleep upstairs. I made their lunches with shaking hands. Left side of the sandwich, crusts off for Ella, square-cut PB&J for Max. Same as always. Same as it ever was. And yet nothing felt the same. That day, I opened every single door in the house except the basement. Linen closet, coat closet, pantry, even Candace's fancy little home office, where she kept her color-coded files and European chocolates she thought I didn't know about. Nothing. No answers. That night, I went to bed early, feigning exhaustion. But I stayed fully clothed, heart racing under the covers. At 3:58 a.m., the hall light flicked on. I slid out of bed and pressed my ear to the door. Footsteps, creak, creak, whispered voices. Then click. Basement locked. I opened my bedroom door just wide enough to see their silhouettes disappearing into the stairwell. I froze. My hand was trembling so hard I had to press it to my chest just to keep still. It would be so easy to go back to bed. Pretend I saw nothing, heard nothing. Be the good mother, the silent grandmother, the woman who knew her place. But something had changed. That night, before I'd gone to bed, I'd placed a tiny piece of blue thread across the basement doorframe, high enough that only someone tall would brush against it. It was gone. Not broken. Not fallen. Gone. Someone had seen it, and that meant someone knew I was watching. I started sleeping with my hearing aids in. Not because I was afraid of missing something. No, by that point, I knew I wouldn't miss anything. I was afraid of pretending not to hear. The human brain can make excuses for a lot of things. Marriage problems, sleepwalking, mice. But not that sound. The first time I heard it, I thought it was Ella. A child's giggle, soft and high, like she was trying not to wake someone. I shot upright in bed, heart in my throat. The clock read 4:06 a.m. The basement door had already closed. I raced to the kids' room, bare feet slapping against the cold tile. Both of them, Max with his thumb in his mouth, Ella wrapped like a mummy in her blanket, were sound asleep. I watched their chests rise and fall for at least a full minute, just to be sure. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I knelt by their beds and prayed. Not because I'm particularly religious, but because I needed to say something to someone who wouldn't gaslight me. The next morning, Candace was standing by the fridge, perfectly composed in a cream sweater and lipstick that never smudged. I played it cool. "Hey," I said, pretending to fiddle with the coffee maker. "Do you ever hear anything strange at night?" She turned, slowly, too slowly. Her smile clicked on like a switch, fast and wide. "Like what?" "I don't know. Sounds, voices, laughter." "Laughter?" she repeated, like I'd said tap-dancing raccoons. "Maybe you're dreaming." I watched her pour her coffee. One packet of stevia. No cream. No hesitation. She was too calm. I'd seen that face before, 20 years ago, on a teacher who kept insisting my son was just energetic, when I knew damn well he was being bullied. So I installed a baby monitor. Not one of those obvious camera things, just a little audio one, tucked behind the hallway table near the basement door. I told Candace it was for emergency purposes, like if the kids woke up and I didn't hear them. She gave me a blank nod and didn't ask a single follow-up question, which was telling. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed with the monitor in my lap, palms sweating against the plastic. At 3:58 a.m., I heard the floor creak, then footsteps, then soft chanting. It wasn't in English. I couldn't place the rhythm, but it had the rise and fall of something ancient, something learned. Then sobbing, low, guttural, like a child having a nightmare. But not Ella, not Max, something older, wounded. I pressed record on my phone, hands shaking so badly I had to steady them against my knees. I didn't listen to it again that night. I just waited for morning. Over oatmeal, while Daniel scrolled through work emails like a robot, I slid my phone toward him. "I want you to hear this." He didn't even glance at the screen, just tapped the phone, held it for half a beat, and deleted the file. Just like that. "You're tired, Mom. You've been through a lot lately," he said without looking at me. The spoon in my hand snapped clean in half. I waited until they left for work before I let myself shake. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat on the floor of my room and stared at the blank screen of my phone, wondering how far down the rabbit hole I'd fallen and how much deeper it went. The next day, Candace left her laptop open on the kitchen island. Normally, she was meticulous about locking it, but that morning, there it was, glowing softly like a trap. I told myself I was just checking the calendar. Maybe something would explain the late-night rituals. But it wasn't the calendar that caught my eye. It was a folder on her desktop titled Garden Plans. I opened it. Inside were scanned pages from books, not gardening guides, but something else entirely. Latin text, diagrams of symbols, ritual circles, notes in shorthand that I recognized instantly, Daniel's handwriting. One file had a name, Covenant Reversal, Draft 3. I didn't click it. I couldn't. Instead, I closed the laptop, wiped the keyboard with the sleeve of my sweater, and walked straight to the bathroom. I threw up. Not because of what I saw, but because I wasn't surprised. This wasn't just a secret. It was a project, something they were working on together. I looked at myself in the mirror, pale, hunched, pathetic. Then I said it out loud for the first time. They're not just hiding something, they're building something. And somehow, I was the raw material. I faked a migraine, told Candace at dinner that I was turning in early, that the noise from the elementary school Halloween parade had given me a splitting headache. She nodded like she cared, like that brittle smile of hers was capable of real concern. Daniel barely looked up from his phone. I took 2 Tylenol, not because of any pain, but because I didn't want my pulse to give me away. I lay in bed with the lights off, fully dressed, shoes on. I counted the seconds between each creak of the floorboards outside my room, fingers tight around the baby monitor hidden in my robe pocket like a weapon I couldn't yet use. At 3:57 a.m., the hallway went still. At 3:59, the faint glow of motion-activated lights flicked on downstairs. I slipped out of my room like breath through a keyhole. The basement door was already ajar. I dropped to my knees, ear pressed against the wood. No words, just the soft pad of feet descending. Then, click. They were inside. I eased my face toward the keyhole, pulse thundering in my ears. I expected darkness, dust, maybe some antique furniture or rusted tools, storage, like Candace had said. Instead, I saw candlelight. Dozens of tall white tapers burned in a perfect circle, their flames swaying as though stirred by breath, not wind. On the floor, red paint, or blood, drawn in careful, sharp angles. Symbols I'd only seen in the old, forbidden books at Catholic school, the ones the nuns pretended didn't exist. Daniel stood in the center of the circle, shirtless. His skin was slick with sweat. His eyes rolled back, lips moving too fast to track. The language was guttural and ancient, spitting through his teeth in waves that didn't sound like any human dialect I knew. Candace stood off to the side beside a large crate. It wasn't cardboard. It was wooden. Old. Reinforced. Bolted on all sides. She rested one hand on the lid and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then the crate shook. I flinched so hard I almost lost balance. She didn't even blink. She smiled. Then she unlatched one of the side panels. The wood creaked. Something inside it shifted, slow and wet, like a body turning over in a shallow grave. I leaned closer to the keyhole, breath caught like a thread on a needle. And then, a hand. No, Not a hand. A parody of one. Grey skin stretched too tight over stick-thin fingers, each one too long. No nails, no creases. It moved with the twitchy rhythm of something that should not be alive. The fingers curled around the edge of the crate. It was reaching out. I gasped. The candles flickered, all at once. Daniel stopped chanting. His head turned. I scrambled back from the door, slamming against the hallway wall, hands trembling so hard I could barely press them to my mouth fast enough. And then, darkness. I don't remember hitting the floor, just the sensation of falling, like my mind slipped sideways out of my own body. When I woke up, the house was silent. I was slumped against the baseboard, cheek cold against the tile. My robe had ridden up around my waist, and one shoe was missing. I looked at the basement door, still locked. The air smelled like smoke and lavender. I crawled, literally crawled, back to my room, shut the door, and sat with my back against it for what felt like hours. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. At sunrise, I opened the curtains. In the backyard, Candace stood by the rose bushes, perfectly still, in a pale blue robe. She was barefoot, and she was staring directly at my window, not moving, not blinking. I dropped the curtain. I didn't sleep that day, or the next. Not because I didn't want to, because I couldn't close my eyes without seeing that hand. And for the first time since moving in, I knew something with terrible certainty. I wasn't a guest in that house. I was bait. I didn't scream when I woke up. I just listened. The house was too quiet, not in the usual suburban peaceful kind of way. It was deliberate, heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. My bones ached from sleeping on the floor. My neck felt twisted, like I'd been pulled into a shape I didn't belong in. I crawled to the door and cracked it open. The hallway was empty. I slipped across the floor and peeked into the kids' room. Ella's stuffed bear was still tucked under her arm, Max's leg dangling off the bed like always. I watched their chests rise and fall, steady, unbothered, good. I tiptoed back to my room and reached for my phone on the nightstand. No signal. I blinked, tapped again. No service. I walked to the far side of the house. Nothing. Not even a flicker of a single bar. I opened the window, leaned out, tried every spot that usually got reception. Dead. It wasn't the network. It was the house. I was still holding my phone when I heard Daniel's voice, low, hushed, and very close. She saw something. My blood turned to slush. I ducked behind the hallway wall, heart pounding so loud I was sure it would wake the kids. I could hear Candace too, her voice clipped and calm. She's old. She'll forget. If not, we have options. I didn't wait to hear what options meant. I rushed into the kids' room and yanked their backpacks from the closet. I dumped out crayon cases and school books, replaced them with socks, apples, water bottles, and 2 fistfuls of snack bars. Max's favourite pyjamas with the space rocket print, Ella's allergy meds. The front door was my next move. I crept down the stairs, skipping the creaky step I knew would give me away. The front hallway was dark, like a set for a play no one wanted to perform. The door had a new lock, big, industrial, with a bolt that slid in from the outside. They'd locked me in. They had prepared for this. That bolt wasn't there when I moved in. It hadn't been there yesterday. The panic hit my chest like a freight train. But something in me went quiet. Not calm, just ice. I turned and walked, slowly now, to Candace's office. Her desk was locked, but the bookshelves were cluttered with art monographs, baby photo albums, and meaningless decor. It only took a moment to spot the one item that didn't match: a thick leather-bound book titled Restoration of Domestic Harmony. I pulled it. It clicked. A panel opened at the bottom of the shelf. Inside, a dusty beige landline phone sat coiled in a nest of cables. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. I dialed the only number I trusted to remember: Eileen's. 1 ring, 2, voicemail. I left the message in a whisper, praying the old answering machine still worked. Eileen, if you get this, I need help. Don't come to the house. Just call the police. Please, please, tell them to check the basement. I hung up, just as the stairwell creaked. Mum? Daniel. I tucked the phone back into the cavity and shut the panel with trembling hands. Mum, are you awake? I grabbed my emergency inhaler from my pocket and ducked behind the armchair, trying to quiet my breath. 1 inhale, hold, exhale. I hadn't felt like this since the night Robert died. But even then there'd been nurses, an ambulance, the soft ding of hospital monitors. This was worse. This was controlled. He was halfway down the stairs now. We just want to talk, Daniel said, voice sweet as syrup. Can we talk, Mum? I scanned the room. My purse was gone. So was my spare phone. Every exit closed, every path watched. Except one. I crawled behind the desk and pulled open the window. The screen popped out with a sharp crack. The night air slapped me like a confession. I turned, saw Daniel's silhouette in the doorway. He stopped. Mom, he said, eyes narrowing. What are you doing? And just like that, my terror crystallized into something else. I looked him dead in the face. Looking for the storage, I said. You said I wasn't missing anything. Then I slammed the window shut, locked it, and ran. Let's talk downstairs, Daniel said, his voice low and coaxing, like I was a nervous dog who might bolt. He stood at the end of the hall in a t-shirt and pajama pants, trying to look relaxed. But his hands were balled into fists. He wasn't asking. I smiled like I was still the fool he thought I was. Let me just check on the kids first, I said gently, already backing toward their room. Max had a cough earlier, remember? He nodded, once, and I could see it, how much effort it took for him not to follow me. I closed the door softly, locked it. Ella stirred. Max mumbled in his sleep. I whispered their names, fast and sharp. Wake up. Now. They blinked at me, groggy and confused, but something in my face must have struck them because neither asked a single question. I handed Max his backpack, slipped Ella's shoes on without tying the laces. Then I unlocked the window. The cold hit like a slap, and the trellis outside looked 100 years old, the wood grey and cracked. But it was our only way out. Daniel knocked, not loud, not yet. Mum! I grabbed Ella, wrapped her in a blanket, and swung her legs over the sill. Hold tight. Use the vines. I'm right behind you. Her wide eyes locked on mine, and I saw it. Her trust. Not in Daniel. Not in Candace. In me. She climbed, slipped once, caught herself. Max followed, faster than I expected, clutching his backpack like a parachute. Then the knocking turned into pounding. Mom, open the door. I didn't answer. I swung one leg out the window. The wood groaned under my weight, and I felt it. Not just the cold, but the pressure, the certainty that if I fell, I wouldn't be able to run. but I went anyway. I landed hard, knees screaming. Ella grabbed my arm to steady me. We ran, barefoot across the grass, too fast to feel the cold, too scared to make a sound. Behind us, the front door slammed open. I didn't turn around. We reached the neighbour's yard. The porch light flicked on like a blessing. Then, headlights. Daniel's car. But too late. The neighbour, a retired vet I barely knew, opened his door, saw my face, and didn't ask anything. Just pulled us inside and locked everything behind us. The police came 15 minutes later. The officer who knocked was maybe 24. Blonde, cocky, bored. He listened to me with raised eyebrows and glanced at the kids like he thought I was just some senile woman making a scene. "I get it," he said. "Your son has some weird hobbies, but unless there's a crime, open the basement," I snapped. "Do it now." They didn't want to, not at first, but I kept repeating the same thing over and over. "There's a child down there, or what's left of one." That got their attention. Daniel and Candace weren't home. They'd taken off the second we'd disappeared. The cops broke the basement lock. I didn't go in. I couldn't. But I saw their faces when they did. The officer who'd smirked at me came out pale and shaking. Inside, a rusted cage with claw marks on the inside. Books, hundreds of them, in languages I didn't recognize. A circle of melted candles. And in the center of it all, in a shallow wooden box filled with salt and red string, was a small set of bones. Child-sized. The salt was fresh. I looked at Ella and Max huddled under the neighbor's blanket, their little hands clinging to mine. I should have cried, should have screamed. But all I felt was rage, not at Daniel, not even at Candace, at myself, for not looking through that keyhole sooner, for raising a man who could do this. The cops kept asking questions. Who was the child? How long had this been going on? I told them what I knew, not everything, just enough. Because some truths are too rotten to speak aloud, and some monsters don't live under the bed. They tuck you in at night, call you Mom, and ask you to go downstairs.